As I've been here for the last couple months, you've learned a little bit about me. When I get up here and tell stories about my life and whatnot, you've learned a little bit about me. And hopefully by now, you have figured out that in my lifetime, I have worn a lot of hats, both literally and figuratively. Much to Chris's chagrin, I'm a collector of baseball caps. I have dozens and dozens of baseball caps. And whenever we go someplace, in those little visitor shops, I've got to pick up a hat from wherever I go, and Chris just shakes her head. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking figuratively. I have worn a lot of hats. I've done a lot of different things. And one of the things you may or may not know about me is that I am a certified life coach, speaker, and leadership trainer with Maxwell Leadership. And Maxwell Leadership was started by John Maxwell, who is a pastor and best-selling author. And he's written over 100 books, mostly leadership books, some kind of secular leadership books and others Christian leadership books. And he's written a lot of books, many of which have been on the New York Times bestseller list. Well, as a student of John Maxwell's, I've read several of his books. And another thing you may not know about me is I'm not really a big reader. In my younger days, I had difficulty reading and just never really my daughter, on the other hand, is an avid reader. She reads, I don't know how many books a month. The number of books she reads in a month is about how many I've read in my lifetime. But I do read about, of course, when I'm preparing for sermons, I read, books on commentaries and books on the Bible. And I do read, like those, what are they called? I don't like calling them how-to books or self-help books, but I'm not into novels and, fiction. I need something that I'm going to be able to use in my life. And so I've read several of John Maxwell's books, and I found them very helpful. One of my favorite, actually two of my favorite books of his, the first one is called Running with the Giants, and then he has a sequel called Learning from the Giants. And in these books, especially the first one, Running with the Giants, John Maxwell imagines what it would be like to be running the track of a great stadium filled with all of the giants of the faith. These biblical giants, these characters in the Bible that we read about. And how awesome it would be if for every lap that he ran, one of those giants came down from the stands and ran a lap with him. And during that lap, they would share with him all of their lessons learned in life, their leadership lessons and life lessons. And that's basically what he has done in this book, is he has imagined having a conversation with these giants of the faith, or what I call biblical heroes. So it's based on those two books that I'm starting this new series that we're calling Life Lessons from Biblical Heroes, or just the Biblical Heroes series. And we're going to look at some of these heroes of the faith, as we would call them, these biblical heroes, and see what lessons we can learn from them that we can apply to our life today. Well, today we are going to begin looking at the life of Noah. But before we do that, I don't know about you, but when I look at these heroes, I feel a little insignificant. I look at them as special people, extraordinary people who are nothing like us. They're not ordinary people. They're extraordinary people because of what, they're in the Bible after all. They did great things. But that's really not a good description of them. It's a misconception on our part, because when you look at them, they really are just like us. They are ordinary people who God happened to use to do great things. So when you think about it, each of us can be a biblical hero, because it really has nothing to do with us. It's what God is doing through us. Now that's not maybe 100% correct, because there is, when you look at these people, there's one common attribute that all of them have. All of them share this common attribute, and that is they were willing to yield themselves to God, to allow him to work through their life. They had to make that choice. Some of them made that choice kicking and screaming on the way. Some of them jumped right in with both feet. But they willingly chose to yield their life to God. And so in that sense, it is up to us. We have to be willing to yield our life to the Lord, to allow him to work through us. But other than that, becoming a biblical hero or a hero of the faith really has nothing to do with us. It's all about God working through a willing servant. So that's what we're going to look at today. Today we're going to look at the life of Noah. And then when you look at the life of Noah, we're going to see that one person can make a difference. The lesson that we learn from Noah is one person can make a difference. What was it about Noah that allowed God to use him? Why did God choose Noah? Out of all of the people alive at that time, why Noah? Well, if you look at Noah's story, it begins in Genesis chapter 5, and it really just begins with the genealogy. Genesis chapter 5 lists out a genealogy from Adam to Noah. And when we read that genealogy, you see that there's approximately 1,056 years between Adam and Noah. Now that seems like a long gap, right? 1,056 years. But when you consider Adam lived 930 years, there was really only 126 years between the death of Adam and the birth of Noah. And so if you go through that genealogy, you see kind of an interesting thing here. Let me list the genealogy that you find in Genesis. I'm not going to read Genesis chapter 5. I'm just going to do the bullets of each person and how long they lived. So, of course, you start with Adam, the first man created. Adam lived 930 years. He had a son named Seth, who lived 912 years. Seth had a son named Enosh, who lived 905 years. Enosh had a son named Kenan, who lived 910 years. Kenan had a son, Mahalalel, who lived 895 years. And he had a son named Jared, who lived 963 years. Jared had a son named Enoch. He's an interesting one. He lived 365 years and then was taken up by God. And we'll save his story for another day. Enoch had a son named Methuselah. Methuselah was the person who lived the longest of all humans in all of history. He lived 969 years. And when you map it out, he actually died the year of the flood. He didn't die in the flood, but he died the year that the flood came. And Methuselah had a son named Lamech, who lived 777 years. A nice, holy biblical number there, 777 years. And he was the father of Noah. And just if you're curious, Lamech died 5 years before the flood. So if you take that genealogy in Genesis chapter 5 and you kind of lay them all out in a timeline, you will see that all of those people, except the first three, Adam, Seth, and Enosh, were alive during Noah's lifetime. That means Noah had quite a pedigree. He had 6 godly generations that poured into his life. 6 generations. Can you imagine what it would be like? I did not have a grandfather. When I was born, both of my grandfathers had died, so the only one pouring into my life was my dad and my mom. I did have a grandmother, but I never really got to know her. So I didn't have those multiple generations pouring in. So I'm kind of envious of Noah having a father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, a great-great-grandfather, a great-great-great-grandfather, and a great-great-great-great-grandfather, all pouring into his life. And they were all godly men who poured into Noah's life. So that godly influence made a big difference in Noah's life. And it set him apart from the other men of that time. So let's take a look at Genesis chapter 6, verses 5 through 9, and see what the Lord saw in Noah. Genesis chapter 6, verses 5 through 9. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the earth, from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. Noah walked with God. He was a righteous man. So we see God looking down at his creation, and all he sees is wickedness. Men have just wicked thoughts in their minds constantly. Even the animals were wicked, apparently, because he wants to wipe them out too. So he is ready to just wipe everything out. But then he sees Noah. Noah, this righteous man who walks with God. And he decides he can use Noah to make a difference. Through Noah and his family, God saved mankind and the animal kingdom. Noah was a difference maker. God chose Noah to make a difference in this wicked world. He was a difference maker. And he shows us that one righteous person can make a difference in this world. So let's take a look at 4 lessons that we can learn from Noah. If you're following along, on the back of your bulletin there are notes, fill in the blank notes that you can follow along in. We're going to take a look at 4 lessons about how one person can make a difference. Lesson number 1 is one person can make a difference in their family. One person can make a difference in their family. Continuing reading in Genesis chapter 6, verses 10 through 18, it says, And Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits. Its breadth, 50 cubits. Its height, 30 cubits. Make a roof for the ark and finish it to a cubit above, and set the door of the ark in its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. For behold, I will bring a flood of water upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you. And you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, your sons' wives with you. So God intended to destroy the earth and everything on it. But because Noah was righteous and he walked with God, God made a covenant with Noah that made a difference to all of mankind and the whole earth, the animal kingdom, everything. God made a covenant with Noah, And because of that, Noah and his family were saved. Noah's sons weren't saved because of their own righteousness. They were saved because of Noah's righteousness. One person can make a difference in their family. As a result, Noah and his family were saved, and one of Noah's sons is named Shem. And Shem was the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather of Abraham. And through Abraham, of course, came Jesus, the Savior of the entire world. So Noah, in his righteousness, made a difference in his family that ended up making a difference for all of mankind through our Savior, Jesus. You can make a difference in your family. If you live a life of integrity and a life of obedience to God, you will be an example to your family. Now, there's no guarantee that they will follow that example, but you have a much higher probability of being a positive influence on your family if you walk rightly with God than if you don't. And I promise you that the converse is true too. If you live a sinful life, the mistakes of the parents will affect not only your kids, but multiple generations. So one person can influence their family in a positive or negative way. But we as Christians are called to walk righteously with God and to be that example, to make an impact on our family. Lesson number 2 is one person can make a difference for God's creation. One person can make a difference for God's creation. In Genesis 6, verses 19 through 22, it says, "And for every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female, of the birds according to their kinds, and of the animals according to their kinds, of every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind. 2 of every sort shall come in to you to keep them alive. Also take with you every sort of food that is eaten, and store it up. It shall serve as food for you and for them." Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. So all of life on earth was destroyed in the flood, except what God led into the ark. God put Noah and his family and all those animals in the ark to save them, to save his creation. Noah obediently built the ark. He gathered the animals that God brought to him, put them in the ark, stored up the food for them, and then cared for them during the flood. One person can make a difference in God's creation. In the history of our country, there's a man named John Chapman. He was an American pioneer and a nurseryman, they call him. And he went around and planted apple trees in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and part of West Virginia. Of course, he became an American legend. We know him as Johnny Appleseed. He made a big difference in God's creation by introducing or incorporating apples into that area of the country. Next time you eat an apple, you can thank Johnny Appleseed. But the point is, one person can make a difference in small way or a big way for God's creation. Christians should be the best caretakers of God's creation that there is. God created Adam and Eve to take care of his garden. We are to be caretakers of God's creation. All of it was created for us. The creation is put in under our authority, and we are to take care of it. But we need to do it according to God's hierarchy, according to God's will. See, that's the problem with non-Christian environmentalists, is they flipped God's will upside down. See, they worship the creation instead of worshiping the Creator. They put animals and plants and trees and the earth at a higher priority than people. They've got it backwards. And they've got things all messed up. But we Christians, if we get it in the right order, realizing that all of this was created for us, it's God's gift to us, then we should be taking good care of it. But not to the detriment of people. We don't put animals and fish and plants over the needs of people. We need to keep the priorities straight, keep God's priorities straight. But one person can make a difference in God's creation, and we are called to be good stewards of what he has given us. Lesson number 3, one person can make a difference for God. One person can make a difference for God. Have you thought about that? How can we, finite, fallible beings, possibly make a difference for an infinite, all-powerful God? Well, it's because he chooses to work with us. He wants to work alongside us and in us and through us. That's why he created us. We were created in his image. And he wants to walk alongside us and work through us and with us. And when we do that, we make a difference for him. In 2 Chronicles 16:9, it says, "For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless toward him." God is there to support us as we work for him. Ezekiel 22, verse 30 says, "And I sought for a man among them who should build up the wall and stand in the breach," or some translations say, "stand in the gap before me for the land, that I should not destroy it. But I found none." God is looking for people to stand in the gap for him, to carry out his mission, to do his work, to be the instrument through whom God does his work. And he looks around, and when he finds none, it hurts him, it grieves his heart. But when he finds a willing person to work with him, it makes a difference to him. It pleases him. Because after all, that's what we're made for. We're made to be workmen of God's. God is always looking for someone to stand in the gap. God was discouraged when he looked at all of the evil in the world during Noah's time, and he had had enough. He was willing to wipe them all out and start over. But then he saw Noah, and Noah was willing to stand in the gap to preserve mankind and all of nature in that ark. God is looking for someone to work with him. And God would rather work with people, I believe, than organizations. God likes that one-on-one interaction. You know, you look at people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, Billy Graham, Dr. James Dobson, and on and on and on. Many, many people, individuals that God has worked through, that has impacted our world. Yeah, there are many Christian organizations that have made an impact, but when you think about it, all of those organizations were started by individuals. Individuals who stepped out in faith, did what they felt the Lord was calling them to do. And the Lord has blessed that and has had a big impact to the world. One person can make a difference for God. Lesson number 4. One person can make a difference regardless of their age. One person can make a difference regardless of their age. You know, we have a way of kind of disqualifying ourselves, looking down on ourselves when it comes to when we think about doing something for the Lord. You know, we always think, well, I'm not smart enough. I don't have the talents or the abilities. I don't have the experience that is needed to do this. Or I'm too young, or I'm too old. We make all of these excuses, all these limitations that we put on ourselves that God never did. You know, all of that is meaningless to God. If God wants to work through you, it doesn't matter. whether you're good enough, whether you have the experience. I mean, you look at the people that God used throughout the Bible, it's the least likely cast of characters, isn't it? Look at the apostles. They were lowly fishermen. And yet we are here today because of their faithfulness. God uses us in spite of our shortcomings. So don't let talent or education or experience or age keep you from serving the Lord. When Jesus fed the 5,000, he did so with loaves and fish from a young boy. When David defeated Goliath, he was a young shepherd boy. When Abraham fathered Isaac, Abraham was 100 years old. And when Noah finished the ark and it started to rain, Noah was 600 years old. Any of you 600 today? Any of you feel like you're 600 today? So we have no excuse. Age is not a limiting factor to what God can do through us. Age, talent, intelligence, and experience are meaningless when it comes to God working through us. Another American example, if you look at Laura Ingalls Wilder, she's a well-known author. Her best-selling book series began with Little House in the Big Woods. And that series chronicled her pioneer life from the late 1800s into the early 1900s. Did you know that Laura Ingalls Wilder wrote her first book when she was 64 years old? And she continued to write up till like 1943 or something like that. And she was 74 years old. Don't let age keep you from accomplishing what God has called you to do. That series, of course, NBC took it and turned it into a TV series in the mid-70s and early 80s. And it's Little House. It's in syndication. You can probably find it as you're flipping channels on your TV. It's still playing. I don't remember when she died, but it's been a long time ago. Her books are still published. Now, she didn't ever really make a big deal about her Christian faith, but she was a Christian. And her Christian belief influenced her writing. So God was able to use her even though she was old by some standards. Yeah, Pat, she was younger than you. But anyway, you know what? The point is that you are never too young or too old to be used by God. That's one of the lessons that Noah teaches us. That God can use people regardless of our age. So when we look at the life lessons from Noah, we can boil all of this down to one person totally yielding their life to God can make a difference in their family, to God's creation, and even to God himself, regardless of our age. So my challenge to all of us today is to stop making excuses. Yield yourself, yield your life to the Lord, give it to the Lord, and just watch what he will do through you. Don't stand in his way. Just say, I'm yours, Lord. Let's have some fun. Let's see what you're going to do with this body, with this life. I'm giving it to you. I think we will all be pleasantly surprised to whatever state we're in, whatever age range, whatever phase of life that we are in, that God can still use us. And if we yield to him, he will.